This is America on the Road, named Best Radio Show by the International Automotive Media Conference, and now in its 31st year on the air. Thanks for being with us as we bring you the latest automotive information from around the world. I'm Jack Nerad. With me is co-host Chris Teague. Chris, back with us after a week off. Great to see you.
Great to see you too, Jack. How are the last bits of summer treating you?
Very, very nicely, thank you, and I hope they are too. I mean, being in Maine in the summer sounds terrific to me. I'd love to do that again one of these days, but we'll see.
Yeah, well, we're being in the rain in Maine most of the summer, so we'll hopefully clear up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I hope you have some nice weather here. Let's talk about the news. Last week we reported that the prices of new and used cars had rocketed up over the past 5 years, and now another study shows that used car prices, and especially used EV prices, are down significantly. So what gives? Well, we'll have the details for you coming up. And of course, as you know, Chris, Tesla just can't stay out of the news. This week, there was a fiery crash of a Tesla Cybertruck, gained national attention. It prompted an inquiry by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So we'll give you more on that story and share our reactions to that. The state of Washington has just announced a new taxpayer-funded subsidy for electric vehicle buyers, and we'll have details on that too. Can't wait to hear your reaction on this, Chris. Really curious about that. BMW has now started to experiment with humanoid robots in its Spartanburg, North Carolina factory. So we'll tell you more on that. What's your favorite among these stories, Chris?
Well, I'm not a big fan of the Tesla story. Anytime there's a fatality, I think that's probably it for me. But I think I'll have to wait and see. Let's talk about it. I'll let you know.
Okay, I like that. Yeah. Hold off judgment until we hear the story. America on the Road is brought to you by drivingtoday.com, emlancy.com, the publisher of my latest book, Dance in the Dark, and Mercury Insurance. If you're looking to save some money, you should switch to Mercury for your auto and home insurance. Californians save an average of $670 with Mercury. So imagine how much you could save. Get a quote today at drivingtoday.com/auto insurance. That's drivingtoday.com/auto-insurance. Well, as you longtime listeners of the show know, Chris lives at one end of the country. I live at the other. Each week we get together to talk about cars, the car industry, and how you can save some money on your car. And Chris, are your kids getting ready to start the new school year? That's coming up.
They are. Well, they start a little bit later, so it's going to be in September, but we're getting ready, and they're well aware that their time of freedom is coming to an end.
Wow. And your test vehicle this week is what?
I spent the week with a 2024 Mazda CX-50. It's a newer crossover in their lineup, and can't wait to tell you all about it.
Look forward to that. My test car is a vehicle I think you know tons about. It's the 2024 Volkswagen Golf R. I think you had one of those. And this week, our special guest is Trevor Lai. He's Senior Group Manager of Product Planning for Genesis. So he'll be talking about the new 2025 Genesis GV80 Coupe. We've got a ton of show for you this week. Stay with us, and we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you. We're so glad you're with us. We do appreciate you listening to America on the Road. And it's great to have Chris back on the show after a week off. Chris, we're going to talk about used vehicle prices. Last week we reported they were up significantly since COVID. Now we're reporting that they've dropped, but they've dropped 26% since 2022 when they were at elevated levels. But, let's kick that around a little bit. This is from Carfax. They say hybrids and EVs have particularly taken a big drop, going down more than 25%, 26.3% since July of 2022. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think there are a few factors at play here, right? So automakers are cutting new vehicle prices. Tesla especially has done that a few times, which kind of depresses the used market. And I think there's also a little bit of apprehension still in buyers' minds. You know, they're not super sure about EV longevity, durability, that sort of thing. And so there are probably some questions that are causing them to take a step back and maybe look at a gas model instead.
Yeah, I think there's tons of apprehension about that. So I think used vehicle buyers are buying vehicles because they have to, largely. They're buying transportation more so than kind of stroking their egos with a new car buy. And so I think they're more utilitarian when they look at vehicles, and maybe the EVs aren't doing it for them. Used vans and minivans are also down about 16% over the course of the last 2 years, and that's a little harder to explain. Also, the drop in used vehicle prices for luxury SUVs and SUVs in general, they're down pretty significantly. Again, over 2 years where they were maybe elevated way beyond where they should have been, and maybe that explains some of it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear the minivan number because, people have to really want to buy a minivan to go shopping for one. So it would seem like, the market's kind of built in there, but interesting numbers. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about this Cybertruck crash. I know you've written about it. I've, done a lot of research on it too. I guess there's not that much to tell really, except a Cybertruck in a single vehicle accident went off the road, hit a culvert, and then burst into flame, killing the driver. A driver so badly burned it was difficult to identify who the driver was. I mean, pretty grave kind of stuff, but a one-off kind of thing, I think. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. It is absolutely a grave situation. They said the fire was so bad they couldn't identify the license plate or the VIN of the vehicle, making it even more difficult to identify. I think I'll say this, when the Cybertruck first hit the streets, so to speak, everyone was concerned that it would be a danger to other people, right? It's a giant, very rigidly constructed EV that weighs quite a bit, but this just illustrates that, the danger goes both ways, I guess.
Yeah, a lot of people are, I think, amazed that electric vehicles catch fire. But with the kind of batteries that they use, I think fire is a pretty big danger with a lot of electric vehicles, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's important to point out that they don't catch on fire any more frequently by volume than gas vehicles do. But once they do, the thermal runaway, as it's called, the chemical reaction in the battery can make it exceedingly difficult to put the fire out. I think, first responders are seeing that they're using thousands of gallons more water to put these fires out.
Yeah, I mean, first responders have to use special techniques on electric vehicle fire because they don't necessarily respond to just the typical kind of fire procedures, I guess is the best way to say it, to deal with that. Putting out of the fire, it seems very difficult, but...
Yeah, in some cases, they've been known to submerge the vehicle in a large tub of water. I've seen stories of them dumping cars into ponds and things to put the fire out just because it takes so much water.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times, water might not be the best thing. Maybe you want to use foam or something like that.
Sure.
But I think fire companies do what they have at hand. Well, I'm really curious about your reaction to this Washington State rebate program or subsidy. It's not exactly a rebate because it's not coming from the manufacturer. It's coming from the state of Washington. The goal of this is to make EVs more affordable for a broader population segment, and I guess we're really all in favor of that. Let me give you some details, and then I'll ask for your comments on this. Buyers or lessors of EVs can get up to $9,000. $9,000 actually for a lease of 3 years or more, $5,000 for a purchase or 2-year leases, and $2,500 for used EV purchases. To qualify, and here's the big one to me, residents must earn no more than $45,000 or so annually, that's a single person, or a household of $93,000 for a family of 4. The sticker price has to be below $90,000, which that shouldn't be too hard to do. What's your kind of take on that, going out the door here?
Those are significant incentives, right? And those, I assume, are on top of the federal EV tax credit of $7,500, which you now can get at the point of sale. I don't know. We've talked about this a lot, and I have a shifting opinion about EV incentives. I think that we've talked about letting the market decide, do people want to buy these vehicles or not? I think that automakers would probably find that they sell quite a bit fewer EVs without these incentives, and the expense of developing them is significant. So I don't know. On one side, I think it's a great thing to promote the electric vehicle adoption, but at the same time, I think that a lot of taxpayers who would probably rather not be paying for this are going to be on the hook for this. So I'm a little bit split here.
Yeah, it's a $45 million program coming out of the general fund of Washington State. Here's the issue I guess I have with it. For an individual earning $45,000, they should not be buying or even leasing a brand new EV or any kind of new vehicle, probably, and certainly not an EV that costs something like $50,000 like that, more than their annual income. That's just, kind of stupid, a stupid financial decision. So I'm kind of curious about that. I mean, it's kind of incentivizing people to make a really bad financial decision. So I have difficulty with that. Certainly cost is a primary barrier to EV adoption. And this said kind of very plainly by Mike Fong, who is the director of the Washington State Department of Commerce. But with the prices of EVs, that's just going to be the way it is. I mean, I don't think low-income folks should be purchasing these vehicles. What do you think about that?
Yeah, now that you bring this up, I didn't think about it this way before, but the people that are making $45,000 a year are likely not homeowners as well. They're probably renting somewhere. So getting into an electric vehicle that's already very expensive and then having to deal with the fact that they can't charge at home in a lot of cases, if they're in an apartment or some other leasing situation. So, I think that now that we're talking this through, I'm kind of coming around, there are some changes that I probably would have made before this hit the books.
Yeah, interesting. But, well, we'll see. I think this is one of those unintended consequences thing, or, with good intentions, maybe
Sure.
This isn't the best idea. But that's my take on it. Let's talk about robots in car factories. BMW is experimenting with robots in their factory in Carolina. And it seems like it's working out. These are humanoid robots. I think they've been using robots for, decades, really, depending on how you describe a robot. But these are more like humans, human-like robots, out of Blade Runner or something like that. How do you feel about that?
I have mixed emotions about that too. I think, we talk about artificial intelligence. You and I, the entire media business is kind of grappling with that right now. I think as a replacement for human jobs, I'm not really all that high on that idea. But if they're doing things like, carrying heavy boxes from point A to B, or, kind of filling in the gaps for the humans, I think that's all right. And again, I'm a little bit frightened by humanoid robots. Well, all robots, really. I think there's some frightening things there, but we'll have to see. I just hope it doesn't take too many jobs.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, as you say, using a robot to save employees from difficult tasks, I mean, that's a good thing. And, there's a lot of weird, awkward tasks that go into assembling a vehicle. So, letting them do that makes sense. But again, we want people to work in car factories and have good employment as well. So a balance there, I think, makes some sense. And there you go. Well, when we come back, we will be road testing some cool vehicles. And I will be road testing a vehicle that Chris Teague once owned. So stay with us for that. And we'll be right back right here on America on the Road. Welcome back to America on the Road with Chris Teague, Jack Nerad back with you. And it is road test time, perhaps my favorite segment. I always like to talk to Chris about cars and cars he's driven. And you've driven a very neat vehicle this time around from Mazda. Tell us about it, Chris.
Yeah, always enjoy my time spent with Mazdas, but this is the 2024 CX-50. And as we've talked about in the past, Jack, I have to point this out at first. Mazda offers this thing in a staggering number of configurations. Looking at the list here, it's my entire computer screen, but the base select model starts at around $32,000. I tested the range topping all the way at the very top, the 2.5 Turbo Premium Plus, which came in at just under $45,000. Before I get too far, Jack, have you driven the CX-50? And if so, what did you think about it?
I have. I think I might have actually been on the launch, and I liked it. I certainly have driven it, I think, since as well. Again, it kind of fits into kind of the hot hatch thing as opposed to being an SUV, but that's fine by me.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the turbocharged engine. But we'll get into that in just a sec. So the base engine is a 2.5 liter four cylinder. It makes 187 horsepower, 186 pounds of torque. The turbo engine that I tested is also a 2.5 liter with a turbocharger. It's 256 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque using premium fuel. Mazda made all-wheel drive standard for all of its SUVs a couple of years ago, and there's a 6-speed automatic transmission. So there's plenty of power here, Jack. 256 horsepower doesn't sound that great on paper, but that turbocharger and the torque off the line, 320 pound-feet, this vehicle feels very lively. It's more than capable of darting in and out of traffic, highway cruising, and passing at highway speeds. Absolutely no sweat for this vehicle. One thing I will say, it's got quick enough acceleration, a reasonably smooth ride, responsive steering, and good handling. However, on the highway, I drove this vehicle down to Boston for a New England Motor Press Association event, and it is one of the louder vehicles I've driven on the highway. There's a lot of road noise from the tires. There's a lot of wind noise, and you can absolutely hear all the vehicles around you. So I think that would be my big knock on this vehicle is it's not the most sedate cruiser, despite having a comfortable ride. I think that there could be some more sound deadening materials here. You know, Mazda kind of pitched this thing as an off-road-ish type SUV, as a more rugged version of the CX-5. And, you know, we got it out on a gravel road, my colleague Kevin and I, and the all-wheel drive system works fantastically. I think, again, here, the noise and the all-season tires on this vehicle, I would not attempt to take it on any serious or even slightly challenging off-road courses or obstacles. So definitely an on-road vehicle, even though it kind of looks like it could hit the trail in a pinch. Synthetic leather upholstery comes standard inside. My range topping model got genuine leather. It's got heated and ventilated front seats, heated rear seats. I appreciate the interior space, Jack. The front seats are wide. They're nicely padded for my wide rear end as an American here. And at 6 feet tall, we haven't talked about my height in a while, but at 6 feet tall.
And it's so sad. I'm saddened by that. It used to be a staple on the show.
Yeah, that's been a while now. But with my seat and my preferred driving position, the children in the back seat have plenty of room, and I even sat back there, and I think that I could ride in the back seat as a 6-footer behind myself without much issue. The rear bench for me is a disappointment. It's a little bit too hard. It doesn't have enough shape. You know, like some vehicles have a nicely shaped and supportive back seat, at least for the outboard, the 2 outside seats. Just not enough support back there for me. Jack, what do you remember about the interior of this vehicle, and how do you feel about it?
I like Mazda interiors. I think they do a good job. I think they look upscale versus, you know, a lot of their competitors. And I think largely they do a good job.
They did, or they do. And this vehicle has a dark brown leather package inside. So I appreciate the contrasting colors. So a lot of automakers go all black or all one color. Mazda does interesting things with the leather and the stitching. So it's a very visually appealing cabin. And I appreciate that. This vehicle also had a panoramic sunroof, which lightened up the interior and didn't make it feel like a cave, which you kind of sometimes get with vehicles with black upholstery or darker upholstery. So you get a 10.25-inch infotainment screen. This is a touch screen in certain situations only. The rest of the time, you're using the famous Mazda rotary dial, not the rotary engine, just the dial, which we've talked about many times in the past. Scrolling through long lists of songs or radio stations, you've really got to crank on that knob, and it's a little bit distracting while you're driving because you have to look and make sure that you're selecting the exact right thing. And I just find it annoying, and I wish it was a touchscreen all the time, or some other more intuitive way to control it. The Top Turbo Premium Plus came with a wireless smartphone, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You get wireless charging. My vehicle also had a 12-speaker Bose audio system that sounds fantastic. There's plenty of bass. It is more than loud enough. And again, the top trim has plenty of safety equipment, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alerts, forward automatic braking or automatic emergency braking, and more. Jack, I don't think the price is out of line here. I think 45 grand for a completely loaded up SUV is probably okay in today's market. Other than the road noise and, you know, some quibbles with the ride quality, I think on bumpier roads, this is a fine SUV, and there's plenty of room inside. So if you don't need 3 rows, this is a great choice.
Yeah. Well, it is a good one. Absolutely. And I still have difficulty getting my arms around $45,000 prices for a vehicle like that. But I think that's what the market will bear. And I think it's a pretty good value. Overall.
Yeah, I had to say it in the context of the market, but a standalone vehicle, 45K is quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was driving a vehicle that costs about that or maybe a little bit more, the Volkswagen Golf R, a vehicle that you once owned, pretty much the same model year, very similar to the vehicle I tested. This is essentially the hot hatchback on steroids, right? I mean, this is GTI plus with incredible bells and whistles and technology brought to bear to make this a super handling kind of vehicle. 315 horsepower from its turbocharged 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. That's kind of just the start of it, but that's a ton of horsepower. It competes with a vehicle you now own, the GR Corolla from Toyota. Honda Civic Type R is probably in that ballpark too. It has an all-wheel drive system with torque vectoring, one of the key pieces of technology that goes into its performance. And it has various drive modes: comfort, sport, race, special, drift, and individual. And I like individual, of course, because I'm an individualist. Drift mode in this kind of vehicle is an interesting take too. It is a practical vehicle in that it will seat up to 5, I guess, and has plenty of room. It's a hatchback. It's a Golf basically. So that kind of makes sense. But it also has this incredible performance. The vehicle I drove costs about $46,000. That's with the manual transmission, and this is the last year, or 2024 is the last year for the manual transmission. And I like that. I like the involvement of it. It's actually slower, 0 to 60, than the vehicle with the dual clutch transmission. But about 5 seconds, 0 to 60, so that's good. Pretty good fuel efficiency, 30 miles per gallon on the highway, or around there. I'm talking about it, but you drove it for a long time, Chris. Tell me your overall reaction to Golf R.
Yeah, I got a little bit burned. I had to end up lemon lawing my car, but I think I miss it still. It's incredibly quick. It's quicker than you would think it would be. The all-wheel drive system is fantastic. The interior and the configuration reminds me of an Audi, so it's very Audi-like. It's an upscale Volkswagen. And you mentioned the drive modes and the performance, and I will tell you that even though the performance is there, the car never really felt like it wanted to do all of the things that it is advertised to be able to do. Drift mode, it will reluctantly do a drift for a little while before shutting it off. So I think it's a fantastic car. It's much more practical than my GR Corolla. And like I said, I do still miss it, even though I had some issues.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to hear that you like it in some ways, or for the practical purposes more so than the GR Corolla that you have, because it does seem very practical. It's also, as you say, upscale, Napa leather seats with blue accents, very cool inside, digital gauge cluster. It also has a driver information system that puts a lot of controls into the touchscreen, which kind of bugs big time, especially if you're new to it. Maybe you came to terms with it. I don't think I have yet.
I did over time. I will tell you that I appreciate the GR Corolla's manual climate control systems and an actual volume knob rather than the sliders, the touch sensitive slider controls that you get in the Volkswagen. Volkswagen's infotainment is not that complicated though, so I think they did about as well as they could have with it.
Yeah, I do like the digital gauge cluster, the instrument cluster, and kind of the, I think, F1 style tachometer display you can have that, makes it very plain for simpletons like me, what gear I'm in and, if it's time to shift or not. All of that's good. I wonder, too, about all this tech, because all this tech certainly goes to make it more expensive. I don't know that it goes to make it that much better. I mean, curious as to your thoughts on that.
I agree. I had the 2023 anniversary edition, so I don't know if yours has a head-up display, but mine had a head-up display and plenty of tech, and that was ultimately its downfall, right? That was the safety equipment malfunctioning is why it was lemon lawed, and there's now a class action lawsuit against Volkswagen for the GTI and the Golf R. So, I think that you reach a limit, and then these cars, it's about the driving experience. It's not necessarily about the touchscreen and things like that. Some of those features are nice.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how many people race their Golf R. I suppose a lot of people do. But at the same time, I think in terms of just fun or fun per dollar, maybe you can have as much fun with a GTI. You won't go as fast, but maybe you don't even realize you're not going as fast. You're probably having as much fun. I love the fact that this has a manual transmission, but that's going away. So I like the Golf R a lot. I think even at $46,000 with all the tech you get, it is a good value. It is practical. There's all that. It has all of that going for it. But at the same time, maybe there's other Golfs like the GTI that for the masses will find a better value.
Yeah, I say I miss it, but the GR Corolla was almost $10,000 less expensive, and I enjoyed driving it more. The driving experience is far more engaging, so I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, so their verdicts on both of those cars, they're right for the right people. And when we come back, we will have our special guest. He is Trevor Lai. He is Senior Group Manager of Product Planning for Genesis. He's going to be talking with me about the 2025 Genesis GV80 Coupe. So stay with us for that, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to America on the Road. Jack Nerad with you, and we're in St. Paul, Minnesota. At least I think we are, but somewhere in Minnesota for certain. And we are having the opportunity to drive the all-new 2025 Genesis GV80 Coupe. You say coupe, not coupe, correct?
Coupe.
Yeah. With me is Trevor Lai. He's been on the show before. He is the big honcho in product planning at Genesis.
A honcho, not the honcho. But yes,
okay, a large honcho. You're honcho-ish.
I'm just there, here to help.
Well, you've been on the show before. You know what we're doing here. Interesting vehicle, I think. We had a chance to talk about the GV80 SUV a couple months ago.
That's right. Yep. Not too long ago.
And now, coupe version, different coupe than those of us who are old school like me are used to calling coupe. But tell us about this vehicle from a high altitude.
From a high altitude point of view, sure, no, absolutely. Back in, if you refer back to the days where you and I knew coupes as, two-door cars, where have cars shifted these days? What's the automotive industry look like, right? So you're looking at light trucks, you're looking at SUVs, looking at crossovers. That's about 80% of new cars sold today. And so the evolution from a coupe or coupe, as you said earlier, right? Coming from cars now to SUVs, it's actually, if you think about it, it's a natural progression, right? And so applying that ethos to a SUV, I think really helps. It helps consumers, right? Now you have an even more stylish choice.
I was going to say a coupe is kind of like a more stylish car than a four-door sedan, typically.
Right.
I mean, that's been the history, and that's absolutely true with the GV80 Coupe, isn't it?
Right. And when we say coupe, if you take a look at the roof line, basically a swooping roof line, that's where your coupe element comes into play. And you really see it, particularly in the profile of the vehicle, right? When you're looking from the side, you could definitely see that profile, that swooping roof line, and dipping down so far back in the vehicle, and then we have a kick up with a very prominent spoiler.
In fact, that prominent spoiler is maybe one of the most important design features of this vehicle, and kind of hard to do, isn't it? It's
quite difficult to do. It's one of those things where we see it on concept cars, periodically, more radical designs, more challenging designs. But then a lot of times when you see a production vehicle, this is the concept vehicle, not for production, like, there's a lot of change between the two. And I think we've done a really good job in, if you take a look at our concept vehicle, not too long ago, I think it was last year, right?
Right.
To where we have production level execution, particularly in that rear spoiler area, right? You have a lot of deep stamping, particularly in this profile, in that side panel of the vehicle. And to be able to do that and bring it to production while maintaining the quality surfacing that we have, not an easy task. So I was really glad engineering was able to do that for us. Now level with me, Trevor.
Concept car and then production vehicle within months, right? Did you kind of reverse engineer the production vehicle into the concept vehicle?
Chicken or egg, right? Yeah.
And then
did we back into it?
Bring it out?
Right.
Because I've seen that done before, and it strikes me as actually a pretty wise thing to do. You let the market have a look at this. You get some publicity out of it. It's a good thing. If there's a horrible error, maybe you can course correct, but probably not. You're probably just going to get better press, and then you move on with this. It's not a bad plan, is it?
It's an interesting theory. I will give you that. Sometimes in the automotive process, there are a lot of parallel processes. So that might have been exactly what happened.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. Well, let's talk about the vehicle itself, because it's a terrific vehicle, and it has a different market, right? I mean, it's aimed at a different buyer than the GV80 SUV.
Absolutely. It's one of the things here at Genesis, right? We always want to have that elevated experience, something that's premium, something that sets it apart from competitors, but also at the same time have a reward space for the consumer, no matter what area of life stage they're in. It could be a single person before kids. They could have family with kids. They could be, an empty nester, what have you. We have a lineup now that'll satisfy each of those market dynamics, especially now more so with Coupe. Now, if you compare our GV80 family now, as we can say, right? SUV, GV80 Coupe now, what we're discussing here today. SUV, again, premium, a little bit more of a family focus, right? You can get a three-row version for the passengers.
Maybe a lot more family-oriented, I would think, right?
Some, because we still retain a lot of the utility piece for coupe, right? So people think, okay, if it's a coupe, it's going to have, well, now you can only sit, 2 people in the back. You're going to lose a lot of headroom. You're going to lose a lot of cargo room. No, we still have retained a lot of the utility functionality that people, and that's the reason why people buy SUVs to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So this is still a sport utility vehicle, just as a coupe execution. So you don't really lose much in the way of rear headroom, and you're not losing very much at all in terms of cargo capacity.
In terms of cargo capacity, which I was kind of interested to hear. I think you said something like 2 cubic feet, which is
it's only about 3 cubes or so in the back, and when you're already working with 36 cubic feet of the SUV, you're not really making much of a sacrifice, if you will, right? You're going from a lot to still quite a bit, so. Yeah.
I think wise to make it a 5-passenger. We see some people or some companies decide to go 4-passenger. Makes a heck of a lot of sense to go 5, I think, don't you?
Right. 5 gives you that flexibility. It's a great just-in-case seat. You never really know. And we come back to it's a utility vehicle. You need to have utility, right? And part of the utility is carrying people. That's what vehicles are all about.
Right. So this is a vehicle. Certainly, its calling card is its looks. Which is not that the GV80 SUV isn't good looking.
Fair enough.
It is very good looking.
Yep.
It's very good looking, kind of a traffic stopper in terms of good looking. But this is even more so, I would say. We talked about the rear spoiler. Actually the wheels that you showed us at the presentation too kind of blew me away. It's how cool those wheels are, and I'm not usually wowed by wheels. But tell us about that, and tell us about kind of the changes visually to this vehicle versus the GV80 SUV.
Right. So once you get beyond the coupe piece of it, right? The wheel design definitely is different, right? Wheels can make or break a vehicle, and for those of us, particularly enthusiasts, right, or those in the industry, definitely very easy to agree with that. So, but we took that one step further, right? We wanted to make sure the fascia was going to be different. We take a look at the grille. The grille is actually a double layer design. So at first it looks like, there's a new pattern to the grille. No, when you get closer to the grille, you'll notice surfacing on a second layer, a more vehicle rearward layer of the grille. That's something different. Lower fascia is completely different. If you look at the corners of the front fascia, it's definitely a bit more dynamic in its appearance. Messaging continues to the rear of the vehicle.
The rear fascia is gorgeous. I think it really is good looking.
It is, and for our GV80 SUV, what we've done is we've de-emphasized the exhaust outlets, right, to give it a bit more presence in the back, a more solid appearance, and that was
make it look more like an electric.
Make it look a little more aggressive, right? More tough, right? For the SUV. Now, coupe, completely different direction we wanted to go with, right? I keep on mentioning dynamic. So we have exposed rear exhaust tips, for example, right? And in the case of our vehicle, our GV80 Coupe, those are real exhaust outlets. It actually, exhaust goes out the back of the car, as it should. It doesn't come out underneath or anything untoward like that. So that's a piece of differentiation from the outside. Inside, the biggest difference, I think, that you'll notice, 2 things I like to point out. One is going to be speaking of wheels, a D-cut steering wheel, right? adds to that whole sense of dynamism, right?
Right.
Come back to the whole dynamic
So we
piece.
might call it flat bottom.
Flat
Right.
bottom or decat steering
Yeah,
wheel. Yep.
yeah.
So that's one piece of it. And then, with that, we have 3 unique exterior colors that are exclusive to the coupe. And I think having a lot of this individuality matches that buyer, that shopper who is very individualistic. They are very fashion forward.
Yeah, they want to
It matches
express
with that.
themselves. They want
Exactly.
to stand out a bit, right?
Yes.
Versus
it's an
SUV.
alignment with what we're trying to go for.
And so you have things like contrast stitching in the interior that kind of points that out. I think one of the features is kind of I'm not sure whether you call it a midnight blue or navy blue, a very dark blue with orange
Yes.
stitching, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Where you wouldn't necessarily see that in a more family-oriented vehicle.
Absolutely. Ultramarine blue, I think, is my favorite interior color for the GV80 Coupe. Orange contrast stitching, not only on the seats where you might expect it, but even like the airbag cover, the steering wheel hub, French stitch all the way around the inside of that hub. So definitely stands out. Even when you first go for a drive, I know you've been driving it this morning, for example, like that.
Well into the afternoon.
And well into the afternoon. And I think, that's the point, right? So in the afternoon, there are so many small details of course, all of our Genesis vehicles, but especially so with GV80 Coupe, because it is so fashion forward, that I think this afternoon you're going to be continually finding pleasant surprise and delights in styling and in details.
Right.
As you go forward in your second half of your drive.
Yeah. Well, a couple of them, carbon fiber in the trim inside, very cool.
Carbon fiber trims, yeah, that's unique for GV80 Coupe. You're not going to find that in the SUV, but even like the aluminum pedals that we've got there, great interior.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about performance. This kind of vehicle starts in some cases in terms of engines and stuff, where the GV80 ends up and then goes beyond that.
Right.
Walk us through all of that.
So what we wanted to do was take all of the great things with our GV80 SUV and then start building our coupe on top of that, right? So now you already have a great basis, not only from a platform point of view, design point of view, but now you're taking that to the next step. And so that top motor, that top engine that we have for our SUVs are 3.5-liter twin turbo V6, right? 375 horsepower, really decent torque as well, similar value, I think 365, 370 or so. That is where we start. The other option, of course, is our e-supercharger variant. It is based on a 48-volt electrical system, and that gets you 409 horsepower, 405 pound-feet of torque. And being it's technically a mild hybrid, since we do have a small traction battery in the rear of the vehicle, that does get you fuel economy improvements as well.
Walk us through this system, because it's different than electrical hybrid additional power, if I'm understanding it correctly. It spins an actual supercharger that supercharges, or does it act as delivering power to the drivetrain?
Yes.
Letter 2. Right?
It does a little bit of both, right?
Okay.
And the whole thing about the e-supercharger system, right? As some folks may know, if you are taking off from a stoplight, it might take a moment before your requested power input, your accelerator pedal, how far you press down on it, actually gets delivered to the wheels. And that's for waiting for the turbos to spool up. And while we have minimized that a lot, you're not going to notice very much of that in our standard coupe. What the e-supercharger does is that it kicks in right at throttle tip-in. So the moment you touch it, that e-supercharger relies on that 48-volt system to deliver a lot of electrical power.
So it's delivering electrical power to the transmission.
Right.
And it's supercharging in that method, as opposed to a typical supercharger, which would concentrate the input air, the induction air, and then...
Right, and so the handoff is completely seamless as well, right? Once the turbos come up to speed, the supercharger tapers off, and then the turbos take over, and then near power peak, both of them work together to increase that output.
Yeah. So it's both well, let's put it this way. I think enthusiasts can find joy in driving the vehicle. At the same time, it functions without any kind of hiccups or strangeness or performance-oriented handling issues or those kind of things, ride issues brought on by handling. Walk me through that thinking about the balance there of handling, comfort, all of that?
So one of the things that we pride ourselves with here at Genesis, it really comes down to a comfortable ride and a rewarding experience for the customer. So going in, that's already our baseline, right? Now, adding a bit more of the dynamic feel, the dynamism that I keep on referencing, right? It's a common theme here. You want to take that as your beginning and then build atop that a little bit, right? So we want to give customers that rewarding feeling, that also a confident driving feeling, knowing that you're safe and secure as you're having fun, driving your vehicle. So
what would you like our listeners to take away from the GV80 Coupe? What do you think they're?
I think my top 3 points are going to be coming back to the styling of the vehicle. It's definitely very distinctive. Bias aside, I think this is the best looking coupe execution of an SUV in the market today. So that's going to be the first one. The second one is going to be the absolute beauty of an interior, right? Having all those different interior materials. Our color materials and finishes team, or what we call CMF team at design, have done a really great job in executing a beautiful interior that is also useful for the customer.
With a lot of interior color choices and texture.
Absolutely, a lot of different color choices inside and out, right? So that's another great boon for us. And the last thing I like to talk about, I think, Genesis always includes a high level of safety and tech, right? So we have the entire safety suite. You don't have to worry about, do I need to pick this option to get the highest safety? Do I need to pick this? No, we make it easy for you. It has it all, combined with a very large 27-inch OLED display that we're running on the inside of the vehicle. That's how it all interweaves together for a very cohesive experience for the owner of a GV80 Coupe.
And it is all of that. It's a wonderful experience all the way around.
Absolutely.
I've experienced it so far.
Indeed.
Well, thanks so much for being with us, Trevor. We appreciate it. Trevor Lai of Genesis.
Thanks. Always a pleasure.
Hands.
Thank you.
That. Yeah, it's a pleasure. You have a good grip, too. I like that. Very good. And stay with us, everybody. We'll be right back right here on America on the Road.
Thanks, Jack.
And that was our interview with Trevor Lai of Genesis. Our thanks to him for joining us. Our thanks to him for inviting me to Minnesota to drive that vehicle. That was fun for me. Chris, what are your thoughts about these new coupe-like SUVs?
I absolutely hated the idea at first. 4-door SUV called a coupe just seems silly, but the newer models, especially the GV80 Coupe, I mean, it's stunning. It looks great from all angles. So, I think you lose some practicality, but you pick it up in style on the other side.
Yeah. And I think for those who like style and want that high driving position, I think it's a good combination. So something to think about as you're buying your next vehicle. That essentially wraps up our show for this week. Before we go, I'd like to mention my newest book, Dance in the Dark, which is a crime thriller inspired by true crime. Of course, I have a passion for crime. I don't commit them, but I do write about them. And this is available in ebook and paperback form. If you like our show, please pass it on. Listen on this radio station each week and let your friends know where you hear America on the Road. And of course, Chris, podcasts of America on the Road are available, aren't they?
Absolutely. A quick Google search for America on the Road podcast will bring us to you on all the major platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all the others. Like us, download us, follow us, leave us a review. All those things help us, and you can take us with you wherever you go.
Right. Absolutely true. We're also available on YouTube and Rumble these days. So you want to see what it looks like in Chris's home studio and my home studio. You're perfectly able to do that by going onto those things. And also see some interesting car footage, I think, maybe more interesting than seeing what my home studio looks like. Our thanks to the Sports Byline Network stations for carrying America on the Road. We do appreciate that. And most of all, thanks to you for listening to America on the Road. Join us again next time for another edition of America on the Road.